The Battle of Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands between the Japanese and American forces from August 1942 to February 1943 was a pivotal moment in the Pacific theater of World War II. It marked a significant turning point, ending Japan's advance through the Pacific and marking the beginning of the end. For the Empire of the Rising Sun, one of the key figures of this battle was Marine Sergeant John Basilone. He became famous for holding the line against an overwhelming force of Japanese soldiers defending the vital Henderson airfield. In the face of death, he demonstrated extraordinary courage, tenacity, and leadership. This video will delve into the heroic actions of this unsung war hero and explore how he defended his post, why it matters till today, and the legacy he left behind. If you want to find out more about other heroes from World War II, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new stories. Let's jump right into it. The early hours of November 15, 1942, were dark and ominous. Heavy rain poured down on the already muddy terrain of the island of Guadalcanal, mixing with the blood of the fallen soldiers that painted the ground a rusty red. For the past 3 months, jungle had been a brutal battleground, where the valiant Marines fought tooth and nail against the relentless waves of Japanese attackers. This night, however, promised to be different. As if sensing the gravity of the moment, the jungle fell eerily silent, amplifying the ominous beat of Sergeant Major John Basilone's heart. He sat in his foxhole, a makeshift shelter he dug near the beleaguered Henderson airfield, listening intently. Not the sound of the approaching enemy, but the absence of it was deafening. After 3 long months of almost daily assaults, the Japanese had gone quiet. Was this an ominous calm before the storm? Or was it the lull that comes just before the final curtain call? For those who have not yet met him, Sergeant Major John Basilone was no ordinary Marine. Born in 1900 in New York City, Basilone had seen his fair share of life's battles before he stepped onto the muddy shores of Guadalcanal. At 23, he had already served in the 1920s Nicaragua campaign and the 1931 Banana Wars in the Caribbean. But nothing had prepared him for the hellish ordeal that awaited him in the Pacific. When the Japanese struck Pearl Harbor, Basilone was in civilian clothes. He was visiting his family in Brooklyn after being granted a leave from his post at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. Upon hearing the news, he immediately reported back to duty, determined to defend the colors he had sworn to protect. He didn't hesitate. Within days, he found himself on Guadalcanal, caught in a desperate struggle against an enemy that seemed relentless and inexhaustible. As the night wore on, Basilone's thoughts raced. The previous 3 months had been hell on earth. Guadalcanal had turned into a graveyard of thousands of brave men. Henderson Airfield, their base, was under constant attack. Sleep was a luxury they could ill afford, and death lurked around every bend. But what made Guadalcanal unique was the stakes. They weren't just fighting to hold their position. They were fighting to turn the tide of the war in the Pacific. If they could hold on, the U.S. could build a strong defensive perimeter from which it could launch counterattacks. If they failed, the Japanese would control the eastern approaches to Australia. November was shaping up to be the ultimate test. On November 14th, the Japanese had launched their most ambitious attack yet. Despite suffering heavy losses, they kept coming. By the evening, Basilone's unit was exhausted. Casualties were mounting, and ammunition was running low. To add to their woes, rumors spread of a Japanese relief force on its way, threatening to cut off their retreat. By the time the first rays of dawn illuminated the battered landscape of Guadalcanal on November 15, 1942, Basilone's unit was hanging on by a thread. Yet when the sun rose higher, lifting the veil of pre-dawn gloom, the enemy assault did not materialize. Instead, an eerie silence blanketed the battlefield, heavier and more unnerving than the sounds of war that had become the soundtrack of their lives. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought relief. It was the silence of anticipation, a pregnant pause before the next wave of the relentless Japanese onslaught. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. A low rumble in the distance grew steadily louder, shaking the very foundations of the Marines' makeshift defenses. It was the sound of tanks. And then they saw them, 8 of them, rolling like metal behemoths across the plain, accompanied by hundreds of Japanese soldiers who charged forward, guns blazing. But there was something different about this attack. It lacked the frenzied desperation of earlier assaults. It was too coordinated, too deliberate. It exuded a chilling confidence. This was not just another attack. This was the Japanese High Command's last-ditch effort to capture the airfield at all costs. As the tanks drew closer, Basilone knew he had to act fast. Grabbing his M1928A1, a weapon that had become an extension of his arm, he fired, each bullet finding its mark with deadly precision. But the enemy was too close. There weren't enough rifles or ammunition to go around. Basilone knew he needed a miracle, a diversion to lure the enemy away from the vulnerable Marines. Looking around, his eyes fell on some abandoned oil drums. An idea sparked in his mind, a desperate, almost crazy plan. He shouted for two of his men, Private First Class Paul A.J. Weigel and Private Thomas J. O'Reilly, to help him carry out his plan. With Weigel and O'Reilly's help, he dragged the oil drums closer to the enemy, forming a makeshift barricade. Then he poured gasoline over it and lit it on fire. The flames rose, casting flickering shadows on the charging Japanese soldiers. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. Would it work? The answer came when the Japanese soldiers veered off course, momentarily distracted by the fiery spectacle. It was all the opening Basilone needed. "Go, go, go," he screamed at his comrades, and they charged forward, taking the fight to the enemy. What followed was a chaotic melee. Marines and Japanese soldiers fought tooth and nail, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood and gunpowder. One by one, Basilone's men fell, but he kept fighting, fueled by adrenaline and the grim determination to survive. Finally, as the sun began its slow descent, the tide began to turn. The Japanese, demoralized by heavy losses, retreated, leaving behind the wounded and dead.
Ow.
The battle was over, but the war was far from it. John Basilone continued to fight until the bitter end of the Guadalcanal campaign, displaying the same bravery and tactical brilliance that had saved his unit on that fateful night in November. When the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire faded into the jungle's embrace, the survivors on Guadalcanal counted their losses and celebrated their victories. They had held their ground. Guadalcanal had not fallen. Among them, Sergeant Major John Basilone stood tall, a beacon of courage amidst the wreckage of war. But while his fellow Marines were awarded medals and citations for their valor, Basilone's name was conspicuously missing from the list. That night, November 15th, 1942, was etched in Basilone's memory. A night when he held the line against insurmountable odds, saving countless lives. However, the recognition that eluded him was not because his actions lacked merit, but because of the strict rules of engagement imposed by the military at the time. His audacious use of the oil drums to divert the Japanese tanks was considered unorthodox and went against established protocols. In the rigid hierarchy of the military, this meant that his heroic actions, while lauded by his comrades, went officially unrecognized. Undeterred by the lack of recognition, Basilone continued to serve with distinction. Rising to the rank of gunnery sergeant and eventually master gunnery sergeant, the highest enlisted rank in the Marine Corps, he trained new recruits, honing their skills and passing on his own combat experience until his luck finally changed. In June 1944, he was awarded the Navy Cross, the second highest award for naval service, for his actions on Guadalcanal. Although it came for years too late, it was a testament to the enduring power of his heroism. After the war, Basilone returned to civilian life, but he never forgot the faces of the men he'd lost. He attended funerals of his fallen comrades, offering his condolences to the bereaved families. Whenever he saw a Marine, he felt a sense of brotherhood, a bond forged in the fires of Guadalcanal. He spent his later years sharing his experiences, hoping to ensure that the sacrifices of those who fought on Guadalcanal would never be forgotten. John Basilone, the Marine who held the line at Guadalcanal, died in 1986 at the age of 85. He left behind a legacy of courage, tenacity, and leadership that continues to inspire generations of Marines. His story is a powerful reminder of the human spirit, capacity for resilience, and selflessness in the face of overwhelming odds. As we remember Basilone and his comrades in arms, let us also remember the lessons of Guadalcanal, the importance of recognizing heroism in all its forms, and the need to honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom.